Nobody could have imagined what a tiny stray puppy was trying to say on that lonely road. At first glance, it looked helpless, weak, and lost. Just another abandoned pup in need of kindness. But the way it barked, the way it stared, and the way it refused to leave the officer's side, it was different. Almost as if it was begging, not for food, not for shelter, but for help. When one officer finally followed the little dog, what he discovered left everyone in shock. He uncovered a secret buried deep in the woods, a truth that would change everything. Stay with us because what this tiny puppy revealed will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. It was a quiet afternoon on the outskirts of town, the kind of day when the air seemed heavy with silence. Officer Daniel was patrolling a deserted country road, his boots crunching softly against the dirt path as the sun dipped low on the horizon. He expected nothing unusual, just another routine shift. But then, in the distance, something small and fragile caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, or a piece of litter swept onto the road by the wind. But as he drew closer, the shape began to move, and then he saw it clearly. A tiny puppy, sitting right in the middle of the path, staring at him. Daniel slowed his steps, his instincts sharpening. Strays weren't uncommon in these parts, but there was something strange about this one. Most abandoned dogs bolted at the sight of humans, disappearing into the fields. Yet this little creature didn't run. It stayed rooted to the ground, its trembling body framed against the dusty road, eyes wide but unblinking. The officer crouched slowly, lowering himself to appear less intimidating. The pup's ears twitched, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it let out a sharp bark, high-pitched, desperate, almost like a plea for attention. The sound pierced the quiet air, unsettling in its urgency. Daniel tilted his head, his brow furrowing. He could sense it immediately. This wasn't a random encounter. The pup wasn't lost. It was waiting for him. The little dog's paws shifted nervously, but its gaze remained locked on him, unwavering. Daniel glanced around the empty stretch of road. There were no houses nearby, no farms within shouting distance. Just the pup and the silence. Slowly, he took a cautious step forward. To his surprise, the puppy responded by taking one small step closer too, as if inviting him to follow. Then it barked again, louder this time, echoing with a strange insistence. Something stirred in Daniel's chest. He had seen fear in animals before, but this wasn't fear, it was determination. Almost as if the puppy was trying to deliver a message. The officer's heart tightened with curiosity and unease. Whatever this stray wanted him to see, it wasn't going to be ordinary. The tiny stray didn't behave like any normal puppy Daniel had ever seen. Instead of retreating or wagging its tail with timid excitement, it seemed focused, urgent. Its small paws pawed at the dirt, scratching as if marking a spot, before it barked again and darted a few steps ahead. Then abruptly it stopped, turning back to see if Daniel was watching. The officer blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Was it leading him somewhere? Daniel stood tall again, hands resting on his belt, scanning the road ahead. The puppy waited, its chest rising and falling quickly. Then, with another sharp yap, it trotted further down the path. Every few steps it would pause and look back at him, its dark eyes pleading, ears flicking in impatience. It was as if the little creature was demanding, "Come on, follow me." At first, Daniel hesitated. This could simply be an abandoned animal trying to find food or a place of safety. Yet something about its persistence made him uneasy. He had grown used to instincts on the job. Sometimes a hunch saved more lives than logic ever could. And right now, his gut screamed that this wasn't random. The pup's determination carried weight. He decided to test it. Daniel crouched again, holding out a cautious hand. "Hey, little one," he murmured, his voice steady. "What's going on here?" The puppy whined softly, then scratched the ground again with urgency. When Daniel didn't immediately move, the pup barked louder, spinning in a quick circle before dashing a few feet forward. Daniel exhaled. This wasn't coincidence. The pup wasn't asking for food, it was begging for help. Slowly, he began to walk in the puppy's direction. Sure enough, the animal perked up and bounded ahead, tail low but wagging in relief. Every so often it would stop again, glance back and bark, as though reassuring itself he was still following. The officer felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. Whatever lay ahead, the puppy clearly wanted him to see it. The air seemed heavier now, the silence of the countryside interrupted only by the pup's insistent yaps. Daniel's boots crunched against the gravel as he followed, his heartbeat quickening with every step. Something was waiting for them, and he knew instinctively it was no ordinary discovery. Daniel stopped for a moment, his eyes narrowing as the puppy yelped again and darted a few steps further down the path. He felt torn. Protocol dictated that he should radio in before chasing after strays into unfamiliar terrain. Yet standing there on that empty stretch of road, he couldn't shake the weight in his chest. The puppy's behavior wasn't random, it was deliberate. Almost too deliberate to ignore. He pressed the button on his radio, his voice steady but low. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniel. I've got a situation. Not sure what to make of it yet. Following a stray off the road. Keep me logged." The crackle of static was his only reply before the line cleared. He exhaled and clipped the radio back to his vest. Whatever this was, he wasn't about to turn his back on it. The puppy stopped again, staring at him with unblinking eyes, its tiny chest heaving with rapid breaths. It gave a sharp bark, then whimpered softly, pawing at the ground as though urging him not to delay. Daniel's lips tightened. He'd seen hardened criminals try to mask their intentions, seen terrified victims cling silently to hope, but never had he seen such desperation in an animal. The pup wasn't asking for kindness. It was demanding action. "All right, little one," Daniel muttered under his breath, adjusting his cap as determination set in. "Lead the way. I'm with you." He stepped forward, his boots grinding against the dirt, and the puppy immediately perked up. It bolted ahead with renewed urgency, pausing only to make sure he kept pace. As Daniel moved deeper into the narrow trail that branched off from the road, the atmosphere shifted. The trees grew denser, shadows stretching longer across the ground as the sun dipped lower. A cool breeze whispered through the branches, carrying with it a faint smell of damp earth. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the sharp, insistent barks of his unlikely guide. He tightened his grip on the flashlight at his belt, every sense on high alert. Something was waiting at the end of this trail, something the pup refused to face alone. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel knew he was about to stumble into a truth far larger than a stray dog in need of rescue. The deeper Daniel followed the puppy, the more the road behind him seemed to vanish. The once open countryside narrowed into a tangled passageway, framed by towering trees and creeping vines. Sunlight struggled to break through the canopy, casting fractured beams across the path. Each step carried him further from the safety of the patrol route and deeper into unfamiliar silence. The puppy, however, showed no hesitation. Its tiny paws pattered quickly over the dirt, ears twitching, tail low, but its movements urgent, confident, as though it knew this place well. Daniel slowed for a moment, scanning the surroundings. Fallen branches littered the ground and the faint smell of damp moss filled the air. The silence pressed harder now, thick and unbroken except for the occasional cry of the stray. He tightened his grip on his flashlight, the weight of his sidearm a steady reminder of precaution. Still, his instincts told him this wasn't danger of the ordinary kind. Something else lingered in this quiet. The puppy barked again, sharp and insistent, before darting left into an even narrower trail that snaked between trees. Daniel followed carefully, boots crunching over leaves and twigs. The trail looked long forgotten, overgrown with weeds that brushed against his uniform. Whoever or whatever used this path hadn't wanted it easily found. His pulse quickened. The officer had been on countless searches before, but the urgency of this one was different. It was as if the animal carried a secret too heavy for silence. The air grew cooler as the woods thickened, the sky above fading into a dusky shade. Daniel glanced upward, realizing how far he had come from the main road. A part of him whispered to turn back, to call for backup. Yet when his gaze returned to the puppy, he felt that same pull in his chest. The little creature stood a few steps ahead, staring at him with eyes that almost seemed human in their intensity, before letting out another desperate cry. Daniel drew a slow breath, steadying himself. Whatever waited in the depths of these woods wasn't ordinary mischief. He could feel it in the air, in the silence, in the way the puppy refused to stop. Something was ahead, something that needed to be found. The forest seemed to close in around Daniel the farther he followed. The towering branches arched overhead, blotting out what little light remained. Every step echoed louder than it should have. The crunch of leaves beneath his boots carried like whispers in the still air. The puppy's sharp barks became the only guide, bouncing off the trees in haunting rhythms. Daniel's senses sharpened. He knew the woods too well to mistake this kind of silence. It wasn't natural. It was watchful. A shiver traced down his spine as his eyes scanned the shadows between the trunks. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there. The pup seemed to sense it too. Its ears flicked nervously, and though it pressed forward, its cries carried more urgency, almost pleading for Daniel to stay close. He tightened his grip on his flashlight, thumb brushing over the switch, ready to pierce the growing gloom if needed. His mind wrestled with questions. Why was the puppy so relentless? Was it leading him to food scraps, to a hiding place, or to something far darker? The memory of the child's shoe he had found earlier flashed in his thoughts, his pulse quickening. He tried to dismiss it, but the possibility gnawed at him. Too many missing person cases had crossed his desk lately. Could this tiny stray be connected to one of them? Daniel's radio crackled faintly on his shoulder, a burst of static before silence returned. He hesitated, debating whether to call for backup now or push forward alone. But when he looked at the puppy, its trembling frame barked again and scurried deeper into the thickets, refusing to slow down. The officer's jaw tightened. Turning back wasn't an option. Not anymore. The path narrowed until it barely resembled a trail at all. Branches clawed at his sleeves and thorns scraped his boots. The air thickened, damp and heavy, clinging to his skin like a warning. Every instinct told him he was close to something hidden, something long buried in these woods. The suspense tightened around him like a noose, every step heavier than the last. Daniel pressed forward, heart pounding, knowing with chilling certainty, whatever the puppy wanted him to find, it would change everything. The trail twisted sharply, opening into a small clearing hidden beneath the dense canopy. Daniel slowed his steps, his breath misting in the cool air. The puppy stopped suddenly at the edge of the clearing, its body tense, ears flattened. Then it barked, sharp, piercing, before running to a spot near a cluster of roots. It scratched frantically at the ground, whining as though it had uncovered something important. Daniel approached cautiously, his eyes scanning every inch of the area. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just damp soil, fallen branches, and scattered leaves. But then his gaze caught something half buried in the dirt. He crouched low, brushing away the debris, and froze. A child's shoe. Small, worn, and muddied. The kind no adult would ever wear. His stomach tightened. He lifted it carefully, turning it in his gloved hand. The shoe was scuffed at the toe, the laces frayed. It hadn't been here long. The soil clung fresh to its surface. His heartbeat thudded against his ribs, a dull roar in his ears. He remembered the missing persons bulletin from just weeks ago. 2 young siblings gone without a trace. A shoe just like this had been described in the report. The officer stood abruptly, scanning the clearing again. Now details emerged he hadn't noticed before. A piece of torn fabric caught on a low branch, faded but unmistakably from children's clothing. A faint indentation in the soil, too small for an adult's step, leading deeper into the woods. His pulse quickened. The puppy whined louder, circling him, then darting a few steps forward before stopping again. Its cries echoed with desperation, as though urging him not to waste a second. Daniel clenched his jaw, gripping the shoe tightly. This was no longer just a curious detour. This was evidence. Every instinct screamed at him to call for backup, to secure the scene, to follow protocol. But another voice pushed louder in his mind. The voice of urgency. The weight of 2 missing children whose lives might depend on the next decision he made. He glanced at the trembling pup, its wide eyes fixed on him. Daniel drew a steady breath. "All right, buddy," he muttered. "Show me the rest." And with that, he stepped deeper into the woods, the puppy leading the way, the shadows closing in. The puppy's behavior grew more frantic as Daniel pressed forward. Its bark sharpened, breaking through the suffocating quiet of the woods, echoing with a strange mix of urgency and fear. The little creature darted ahead, then doubled back, circling Daniel as if terrified he might turn around. Its paws scraped at the soil, leaving shallow grooves, each movement desperate, pleading. Daniel's grip tightened around the small shoe still clutched in his hand. He could feel the weight of what it represented, the possibility that children were still out here waiting for someone to find them. The thought quickened his steps, but it was the puppy's restless cries that truly propelled him forward. Each bark seemed to say, "Faster, you're running out of time." As the trail wound deeper, Daniel noticed subtle signs he had missed before. branches bent unnaturally, as if something, or someone, had pushed through in haste. Faint impressions in the mud too small for adults but too deliberate for wildlife. Scraps of fabric snagged on brambles. Each detail painted a picture he didn't want to imagine but couldn't ignore. The forest wasn't empty, it was holding secrets. The puppy suddenly stopped, its body rigid, tail tucked tight. It let out a long, mournful whine before pawing frantically at a thick patch of ivy covering the ground. Daniel rushed to its side, crouching low, brushing the leaves aside with his gloved hand. The soil here looked disturbed, as though something had been dragged across it recently. His stomach churned. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, trying to calm the trembling pup. But the dog only grew more desperate, scratching harder, dirt flying beneath its tiny claws. Its whimpers tore at Daniel's resolve. He had seen animals loyal to their owners, but this went beyond loyalty. This was desperation rooted in grief and hope colliding all at once. Daniel knew then he couldn't stop, not until he uncovered what the puppy was trying to show him. He slipped the shoe into his pocket, his other hand brushing the ivy aside more forcefully. The air here felt heavier, colder, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. The pup barked sharply, snapping him out of his thoughts. Whatever was hidden ahead, they were close, too close to turn back now. Daniel's pulse raced as he pushed past the ivy. The soil beneath felt uneven, not like natural ground but disturbed, layered with something hidden. The puppy barked furiously, pawing until its claws struck against wood. The sharp sound echoed in the clearing, pulling Daniel's breath short. He brushed away more leaves, revealing a slab of weathered planks. It wasn't just debris, it was a door. Daniel froze, staring at the rough boards set into the ground. The wood was old, splintered, and reinforced with rusted hinges barely visible beneath the dirt. His flashlight beam swept across it, catching the faint outline of a handle half buried in the soil. The pup whined urgently, scratching at the edges, desperate to open it. The officer swallowed hard, his throat dry. Cellars like this weren't uncommon on old properties, but here, deep in the woods with no house in sight, it made no sense. His stomach tightened with unease. Hidden doors rarely led to anything good. He knelt, pressing his ear against the planks. For a moment there was only silence. Then, faint, almost imperceptible, he thought he heard something. A muffled sound, like the echo of a cry swallowed by the earth. His eyes widened, adrenaline flooding his veins. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniel," he whispered into his radio, voice sharp with urgency. "Possible underground structure. Request immediate backup. I'm sending coordinates." His voice steadied, but his hands trembled as he transmitted the location. The puppy barked again, its body pressed low, tail thumping against the dirt. Daniel gripped the handle, pulling hard, but the wood resisted, sealed tight by years of soil and rust. He cursed under his breath, bracing his boots against the ground as he yanked again. The hinges groaned, wood splintering under the strain. Finally, with a loud crack, the door gave way. A foul, musty air rushed out, damp and suffocating, forcing Daniel to cover his mouth. The pup backed away, growling low, ears pinned flat. The darkness beneath seemed endless, a gaping mouth opening to secrets the forest had tried to bury. Daniel's heart hammered. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, aiming it into the abyss below. What he saw made his breath hitch. Chains, rusted, coiled in the dirt, and shadows that didn't belong. The puppy barked sharply, demanding he act. Whatever was down there, it was waiting to be found. Daniel's fingers tightened around the edge of the cellar door, his muscles straining as he heaved it open wider. The hinges screamed in protest, each metallic groan echoing through the woods like a warning. The stench pouring out was stronger now. Damp earth mixed with decay, the kind of smell that made his instincts flare. Behind him the puppy whined, pacing anxiously, but its eyes never left the gaping entrance. He swung his flashlight beam down the narrow stairwell. The light cut through layers of dust, illuminating old stone walls slick with moisture. Cobwebs clung thick across the corners, undisturbed for years. Yet something about the atmosphere was wrong, too heavy, too charged. Daniel swallowed hard, every nerve in his body screaming caution. He reached for his radio again. "Dispatch, I've located an underground chamber. Opening entry now. Backup en route?" The response crackled. "ETA, 10 minutes. Proceed with caution, officer. 10 minutes. 10 minutes could mean the difference between life and death." Daniel exhaled, steeling himself. He drew his sidearm, his flashlight trembling slightly in his other hand. Slowly, he descended the creaking wooden steps, each groan under his weight, amplifying the dread that coiled tighter in his chest. The air grew colder with every step, the darkness pressing harder against his beam. Halfway down, he froze. A noise, faint but unmistakable. A soft whimper carried through the gloom. Not the puppy this time, something else. Someone else? His pulse spiked. Hello? His voice echoed off the damp walls, swallowed quickly by silence. He gritted his teeth, pushing further until his boots met the stone floor. His flashlight swept across the chamber, revealing fragments. Broken crates, rusted cans, and scattered chains bolted to the wall. The sight made his stomach twist. Suddenly, the puppy barked sharply from above, its cry bouncing down into the chamber like an urgent command. Go deeper. Daniel pressed forward, his breath shallow, his weapon steady. The chamber stretched into a shadowy corridor, darker than anything he'd faced before. The smell thickened, the silence heavier. Every step told him he was about to find something no officer could ever prepare for. And in that suffocating darkness, he realized there was no turning back. Daniel's flashlight beam trembled as it swept across the stone chamber. The air was thick, damp, and suffocating, pressing down on him like a weight. His boots scraped against the floor, stirring up dust that had been undisturbed for years. Yet beneath the silence, there was something alive. He could feel it, the faint hum of presence hidden in the shadows. The beam caught on the chains first. Rusted, heavy, bolted into the walls. Some lay slack on the ground, others stretched taut, as though they had once restrained something or someone. Daniel's stomach clenched. This wasn't a cellar meant for storing supplies. This was a prison. He moved cautiously, the light revealing more fragments. Scraps of fabric torn and dirt-stained, an overturned metal bowl, a blanket so ragged it looked more like rope than cloth. A sudden noise made him whip around. Quick, sharp, like the shuffle of movement. His breath caught. Who's there? His voice cracked against the stone, swallowed almost instantly. For a moment, silence answered. Then came the sound again, softer this time, followed by a faint whimper. Not animal, human, Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He pressed forward, the corridor narrowing into a darker pocket of the chamber. His light cut across the floor and stopped on something chilling, a small handprint smeared in dirt along the wall. His breath hitched as his beam rose higher, illuminating faint scratches etched into the stone, desperate lines carved by fingernails. His chest tightened. Someone had been trapped here, fighting to escape. The whimper came again, clearer now, followed by a cough. Daniel's heart lurched. He raised his voice, steadier this time. It's all right. I'm here to help. Don't be afraid. He edged closer, his flashlight finally landing on a shape curled in the corner. For a moment he thought it was debris. Then the shape shifted, trembling, and two wide eyes reflected back the light. Fragile, terrified, alive. Daniel froze, every muscle locked in disbelief. The puppy's relentless cries, the frantic scratches, the hidden cellar. It all led here. Someone had survived in this nightmare, and as the child's faint whisper broke through the silence, Daniel knew the truth. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a rescue waiting to happen. Daniel's breath hitched as his flashlight lingered on the tiny figure in the corner. The child flinched at the light, curling tighter into the shadows, as though the darkness offered more safety than the man standing before them. His heart twisted. Fear this deep didn't come from being lost. It came from captivity. Slowly, Daniel lowered his weapon, raising one hand in a calming gesture. It's okay, he said softly, his voice low, steady. You're safe now. I'm here to help. The words echoed in the chamber, but the child didn't move. Their wide eyes shimmered with tears, their lips trembling as they whispered something too faint for him to hear. He crouched lower, straining to listen. Help. My sister. The words froze him in place. His flashlight shifted, sweeping the corner again. Another shape stirred in the darkness, smaller, weaker. Daniel's chest tightened as the second child came into view. Her tiny frame slumped against the wall. She didn't lift her head, only let out a faint moan, her breath ragged and shallow. For a moment, the officer's training collided with raw emotion. He had found them, the missing children. But their condition was worse than he had feared. Every second mattered now. He grabbed his radio with urgency, his voice clipped, commanding. Dispatch, I have visual on 2 miners. Repeat, 2 miners located alive. Immediate medical response needed. Situation critical. The puppy barked furiously from the opening above, its cries echoing down the chamber like a battle drum, urging him to act faster. Daniel glanced back at the children, their faces pale, their eyes pleading. The boy clutched his sister's hand tightly, his voice breaking as he whispered again. "Don't let her die." Daniel's throat tightened, emotion threatening to crack his composure. He forced strength into his voice. "She won't, I promise." He pulled off his jacket, wrapping it around the little girl, then crouched lower to lift her carefully into his arms. She was frighteningly light, fragile as porcelain. The boy reached for him, desperate, terrified. Daniel extended his other hand. "I've got you both. You're not alone anymore." In that moment, the full weight of the discovery pressed down on him. This wasn't just evidence. This was life hanging by a thread, and it was his job to make sure that thread didn't break. Daniel tightened his hold on the little girl, feeling the fragile rise and fall of her shallow breaths against his chest. Her brother clung to his side, refusing to let go, his tiny hand gripping Daniel's sleeve as though his life depended on it. The officer's instinct screamed urgency. These children didn't just need safety, they needed medical attention now. Dispatch update: 2 children located alive, both in critical condition. Immediate medevac required. Daniel's voice cracked with authority as he climbed the cellar steps. His flashlight beam shook with each hurried movement, cutting jagged patterns across the damp walls. Above, the puppy barked furiously, darting back and forth as if guiding the path upward, determined not to leave them behind. The air outside felt sharper, colder, as Daniel emerged from the dark pit into the fading light of the woods. The children whimpered at the sudden brightness, their fragile eyes squinting after so long in shadows. "It's all right," Daniel reassured, shifting his weight to carry the girl more securely. "You're safe. We're almost out." The sound of crunching boots thundered through the clearing. Backup had arrived. 2 officers rushing forward, their faces blanching at the sight of the frail children. One immediately grabbed the radio, relaying Daniel's urgency to the paramedics en route. The other helped guide him toward the waiting patrol car positioned at the edge of the woods. The boy's voice broke in a hoarse whisper. She can't breathe right." Daniel glanced down, panic tightening in his chest. The little girl's lips had paled, her breaths shallow, erratic. "Stay with me," he urged, lowering his face close to hers. "You're strong. You've made it this far." He pushed his legs harder, racing against time. The patrol car door swung open, its back seat cleared. Daniel gently laid the girl down, draping his jacket tighter around her frail body. The boy crawled in beside her, refusing to release her hand. The puppy jumped up against the car's frame, whining anxiously, its eyes never leaving the children. And then, sirens. The rising wail of paramedics pierced the air, growing louder by the second. Daniel exhaled shakily, relief and determination surging together. The fight wasn't over, but the rescue had begun. The flashing red and blue lights painted the clearing in a blur of urgency as paramedics rushed from the ambulance. Their gear clattered against the ground as they sprinted toward the patrol car where the children lay. Daniel stepped back, his chest heaving, watching with clenched fists as the medical team descended on the siblings. "Severe dehydration," one medic muttered, shining a penlight into the girl's eyes. "We need oxygen now." Another gently lifted the boy, checking his vitals as the child clung desperately to his sister's hand, refusing to let go even as paramedics worked around him. The sight tightened Daniel's throat. These 2 had survived something unimaginable, and now every second determined their future. The puppy yelped anxiously, circling the medics, its nails scratching against the asphalt. One paramedic tried to shoo it away, but Daniel stopped him with a firm shake of his head. "No, he stays," he said. "That dog's the reason we're even here." The pup pressed its nose against the boy's hand, letting out a soft whine. The child's trembling fingers curled weakly into its fur, a faint smile flickering across his lips despite the exhaustion. Within minutes, the medics had the girl on a stretcher, oxygen mask secured, IV lines flowing. The boy, though weak, clutched at his sister as they were wheeled toward the ambulance. Daniel walked alongside, his boots heavy on the pavement, the puppy trotting loyally at his side. As the ambulance doors opened, the boy lifted his head, his eyes glistening with tears. His voice was barely a whisper, but Daniel caught every word. "He never left us. He stayed until you came." His gaze shifted to the puppy, and the meaning struck Daniel like a blow. He froze, Realization washing over him. This stray wasn't a stranger at all. It had been with the children the entire time, guarding them, searching for help, refusing to give up. Its cries, its desperation had not been random. They had been a lifeline. The paramedics loaded the stretchers inside, the doors slamming shut. Sirens wailed to life. The ambulance tearing down the road toward the hospital. Daniel stood still, his hand resting on the pup's trembling back. For the first time that night, relief cracked through his fear. The children were alive, and the stray puppy, they owed everything to him. The night bled into dawn as Daniel sat outside the hospital, the weight of the night's events still pressing heavy on his shoulders. The puppy sat at his feet, its head resting against his boot, eyes fixed on the doors where the children had been rushed inside. Every now and then it whimpered softly, ears twitching at the muffled sounds from within, as though it refused to rest until it knew they were safe. Inside, investigators pieced together the evidence collected from the hidden cellar. The shoe, the torn fabric, the chains, all confirmed what Daniel already knew in his gut. Someone had kept the children there, hidden away in the darkness until the puppy had broken free, but it was the testimony from the boy, once he was stable enough to speak, that shattered everyone's hearts. Through cracked lips and a trembling voice, the child revealed the truth. The puppy wasn't just a stray. It had belonged to them. It had been their silent guardian during those endless days underground. When the captor had abandoned them, thinking no one would ever find the hidden cellar, the puppy had slipped through a narrow opening. Instead of fleeing, it had spent days searching for help, barking at strangers, chasing after cars, and finally crossing paths with Officer Daniel. The investigators were stunned. The dog had done what no one else could. It had refused to give up on its family. The boy clutched the pup tightly when they reunited, whispering through tears, "He saved us. He's our hero." The little girl, though weak, managed a faint smile, her small hand reaching for the puppy's ear. Daniel's throat tightened as he watched from the corner of the hospital room. He had seen acts of bravery from fellow officers, soldiers, and first responders, but this was different. This was loyalty in its purest form. A stray to the world, yet an angel to the children who owed him their lives. The report would later call it a remarkable case of animal instinct, but Daniel knew better. This wasn't instinct. It was love, the kind that defied fear, hunger, and exhaustion. The kind that refused to let go even in the darkest of places. Days later, the hospital discharged the children, both frail but recovering. The town gathered quietly outside, whispers turning into gasps as the siblings stepped out hand in hand, the little girl still weak but smiling faintly. And beside them, tail wagging and eyes glowing with pride, walked the puppy, the same tiny creature everyone had once overlooked, now celebrated as a hero. Cameras flashed, reporters pressed forward, but the boy's small voice cut through the noise. "He never left us. He saved us." The crowd fell silent, many wiping tears as they realized the truth in his words. The mayor later called the puppy a symbol of courage. A shelter offered to take him in, but the children refused to let go. Their arms wrapped tightly around the pup as if to remind the world that he wasn't a stray anymore. He was family. Daniel stood nearby, his chest swelling with quiet pride. He knew this wasn't just a rescue. It was a story of survival written by a bond stronger than fear. For Daniel, the memory of that night would never fade. The desperate barks in the silence, the hidden cellar, the children's eyes glistening in the darkness. But more than anything, he remembered the unwavering determination of a puppy too small for the weight it carried, yet strong enough to save lives. He bent down, scratching behind the pup's ears, whispering, "You did more than any of us. You're the real hero here." The story spread far beyond the town, reaching homes around the world. People marveled at the loyalty of a little dog, a reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms. They sometimes come with wagging tails and unshakable hearts. And as the children clutched their furry guardian, hope shone brighter than the pain they had endured. In the end, the truth was undeniable. This puppy wasn't just begging for help. He had carried a message of life, of love, of resilience, and because one man chose to listen, 2 innocent lives were saved. So the next time you see a stray on the road, remember this story. Sometimes the smallest cries carry the greatest miracles.